All right, hey everyone. I just wanted to talk about narrative state networks as a device for helping us do narrative design. So I got to do a couple of things. First is I'm attempting this without any cuts or anything like that, so it might be a bit rough. Let's just pretend that we're in a live class. But the other thing is I'm only budgeting 15 minutes for this talk, so this actually deserves a lot longer than 15 minutes, especially the problem that we're dealing with, which is essentially how do we get the best of both worlds between story structure and agency? So just very quickly, this is a really big problem, but essentially in the first half of this class, we've been talking about Freytag, all the different stages of the stories, different structures, hero's journey, that kind of thing. And the whole idea with that is to try and make the story more palatable, more coherent, easier to understand, more engaging, all that stuff. But the issue with that is, as we're going through that experience, the audience can't do anything to affect stuff in the world. And since we're dealing with immersive environments and interactive situations, we really need to take into that. We really need to take that into account. And I guess the issue with that is, as soon as we allow people to start doing things within our story worlds, they start ruining our structure. Story structure and audience agency are not natural friends. Some people would say they're diametrically opposed. So the whole idea of narrative design is to try and marry these two. I guess just going to give you this little lay of the land kind of situation really, really quickly. And it goes a lot deeper than what I'm saying now, but just basically, the exemplar for good quality narrative experiences is Shakespeare. We've had to study him all throughout school. A lot of people are still writing about him, and there's always new productions of Shakespeare's plays. And I think that's a fair enough example to say, yep, that's a pretty good narrative experience. That's why it keeps coming up even after a few hundred, almost 1,000 years now. Let's put Shakespeare there. But the problem with Shakespeare, I guess, it's not really a problem, but a characteristic of a Shakespeare and plays and traditional linear stories that we talk about is there isn't really any agency. So you see this story structure and audience agency. You have quality of narrative on this axis and then audience agency on this axis. Shakespeare has a very high level of quality narrative experience, but no agency really. And then on the other side of things, sports ball. So you can see my contempt for sports. That's just a little bit of a facetious thing. But essentially, if you take any sport, there isn't really much of a narrative in there. It's that people are just playing games, but they have full agency to do stuff within the rules of those games. So that's like the opposite of things. So where we really want to get to is up here, where there's a high quality of narrative experience, but also a high level of agency. But I guess what I'm describing here is a little bit of a fantasy, because we've discussed live action role playing games, and then if people participating in it aren't that good or aren't that experienced, then the quality of the narrative experience goes down, although you still have full agency. So really the solution to that is, have everyone as professionals, but that's going to be really expensive because you got to pay everyone. So then we have this compromise. So we basically take away needing to pay someone by replacing them with virtual characters and virtual situations and that kind of thing. And then we have these award-winning narrative experiences like Half-Life and Bioshock. And I'm sort of glazing through these. These are much more significant that I'm actually letting on. So please have a look at all this stuff. But I'm just situating them in this graph thing. So now coming back to what we're doing here in narrative and sense making, is your assignment 1 would have been located around this area. I mean, I'm not. Let's just admit that we're not as good as Shakespeare. That's why the quality of the narrative experience is here. But you can see that it's a little bit further along in terms of agency, because we at least had some choice as to where we wanted to go in the space, although we were very directed. And then we also had some choice in how fast we went through the experience, because you could walk slow, or you could not look at the right thing or not do things immediately. But essentially it's basically a linear experience. So now for assignment 2, we want to go a little bit beyond that, but you can see that the range of the quality has now quality of narrative experience has now sort of expanded, because naturally, as we explained, if we were to demand more audience agency, the risk is the narrative experience could possibly go down. So our goal is to try and maintain both, so the quality of the narrative experience as well as give people agency. So that's basically where the narrative state network comes in. This is one device that we can use to maintain both a coherent narrative arc and then also some agency. So I'll admit now this is just basically something I made up. It's a combination of my experience doing narrative design and doing gameplay design and reading other people's ideas of how to actually deal with this kind of thing. So this is the official algorithm. I won't spend too much time with this. You can just go back and read this and do it step by step. But I guess the idea with this talk is we'll go through and do a worked example, and then that's how the algorithm will show up. But essentially, the first step is we need to set up our world, and then once we've set up our world, that's basically when we kind of start expanding it out. And then here you can see the iterative design process is built into this, because every time you make modifications, I mean, you're allowed to go back and change anything else that you've put in before. So yeah, without further ado, let's go do a quick example using this algorithm. So first 2 steps, we need to define our world, and then we need to define the characters within that world. So basically, let's just go ahead and do that. So right, cool. So what's our setting? Well, I'm going to say that we're in a low-tech medieval period, and we've got knights and all that cool stuff. So then we can just start with the main character now. And this is really important, because in immersive experiences, the ones that we're designing, we're seeing the world through the main character. So we really need to define what this main character is doing at the beginning. So if we go back to the algorithm, it's what are the basic characteristics, what are their key moral values, what are their motivations, abilities, and if relationships to the other people. So let's just define that. So I'm just going to say, yep, Fred is a poor teenager, he's a peasant, but he's got a strong sense of justice, so he wants he just wants less suffering for people, but in fact he's not too hot on the law. And then he also has this ability of being a charmer. And then okay, what's next? Then we can put in an antagonist. So let's just call him Lord McSnoot. He's just a rich, self-entitled bastard, basically, but he has some legal power. And then let's just add a potential love interest. We don't actually know what's going to happen. So anyway, we've set up the initial conditions of the world. This is where we're going to start. And then we can then go ahead and start making up our state diagram, a narrative state diagram. So well, if we go back here, it's step 3 basically, which is the initial state. Essentially this is once we've finished step 3, we're just going to be looping back between these things. So 4, 5, 6, and then we go back to 4, 5, 6, 4, 5, 6 until we kind of finish. We're satisfied with the state of our narrative or our narrative experience. So the very beginning, we go, okay, Fred's working in a farm. I'm going to note the stage, the story stage that it's in, and it's very clearly exposition. And usually this first thing would be exposition. But sometimes you might want to do something slightly different, where you have like a big climax, like right at the very beginning, to really try and get people's attention. But this is like a traditional thing. So I'm just gonna write like a one sentence or very short phrase of describing what this stage is, and then next is we just go ahead and describe that even more. What's actually happening. Don't go too crazy about this, because this is just basically the whole idea of the narrative state network is to try and have an overview of what you're going to be doing later on when you're implementing it. So yeah, just very, very quick things, short points, dot points, and we're not really worried about prose or anything like that, or even more refined descriptions, because that happens later down the line. We just use this as a guide for us. So anyway, we noticed that as we were writing stuff down, we've identified a new agent. We've introduced Fred's mum. So, well, let's just go back. We need to go back to our sort of character sheet and that kind of the initial settings of the world, and add Fred's mum. So let's just do all the quick characteristics, and there's a meeting on, but I'll just keep going with this. Hopefully I still keep within the 15 minutes. Anyway, yeah, Fred's mum, usual stuff. And then once we've registered Fred's mum, we can go back to our state network, network diagram. That's what its current state is. Now we can go ahead and proceed and add changes. So basically this is the current state. What's going to happen? So we need to think about catalyst events that would lead to other states. So then let's maybe do something like, maybe we see dust clouds in the distance. So basically then what you need to do is just write a little description of what that transition event or catalyst event is going to be. And then you draw an arrow out, and the intention is at the end of that arrow is going to be a new state. So then we can say, let's just say that Lord McSnoot has come to try and bother the locals. And then the stage here then is we start to go ahead with tension building. So you can see like the progression of the story stages is still coherent. You have exposition, and then it goes to tension building. And then let's go ahead and describe what's actually happening with the extra stuff. So, I mean, you can put in like a little bit of key dramatic events that you wanted to happen. So I guess if you think it's really, really important for the dust cloud to build the tension, and then increasing the sound and that kind of thing. And then finally, we see Lord McSnoot's really obnoxious carriage. So yeah, just write those things down, sort of like important points, but you don't have to make it all super poetic or anything like that. So because these are just sort of design notes basically for our developers and other people in the team to try and work off of. Unfortunately, actually, like for assignment 2, you're a team of 1. So, but yeah, don't. Anyway, that's. I'm just trying to clarify the role of the state network. Don't implement everything in the state network. Implement it later on. Just use this as a guide. Anyway, we have a new catalyst event. So then it's like so Lord McSnoot's making trouble in the town. So then we could say that, okay, what if we let Fred decide to kill Lord McSnoot. So then we then like write that up. We draw the arrow, and then we move on and make the new state. And then again we note, so like this is going to be a climax situation, and there's going to be a fight between McSnoot and Fred. So you can see that arc there. So you probably would have done a similar thing to when you were developing your own story for assignment 1, but it's like just one line at the moment. So then let's so you see here that the description isn't really that detailed anymore. We just need to have a fight. I don't really care. So and it needs to be epic. So like how do we make it epic later on? That's something that we need to craft later on, but like that's the point for this. Yeah, and then I guess like what's gonna happen after this, we do another state. So what if Fred wins in that situation? So and then the locals celebrate. You can see that the stage now here is resolution. So we have the full sort of beginning, middle, and then end situation with our story. And that's and you're right, there's extra notes in there. So that's our linear story. But we can have user choice. So like basically it's not just a single thing. So if we were to add user agency, that means we're taking into account choice and people being able to affect the world. So what if Fred lost? What if Fred doesn't always win? So then we just sort of build that out. So so Fred loses. McSnoot doesn't actually kill Fred because he's more useful as a warning device. But then maybe he wants to do more extra stuff, like make Fred pay for fighting him. So maybe Fred looks at Felicia's mom. McSnoot looks at Fred's mom, Felicia, and then his intention is to try and do something to Fred's mom to try and punish Fred. And then you can kind of see that we can use the other agents to try and increase drama and like meaning, because why would we care if McSnoot was torturing someone else? Well, we care because it's Fred's mom, and then we've shown that they're actually pretty close, and it's just a usual mother-son relationship kind of thing. And it would be really bad if McSnoot were to do something terrible to Fred's mom, more so than if McSnoot were to do bad things to Fred, more than the violence is already committed to Fred. But anyway, you can see that if we were to go through this line, it's still somewhat coherent, right? So you have it's basically not the same story stages. It's not just like climax to climax or tension building to tension building to tension building. It's like changing around. So this is kind of like this is the way you manage the dramatic arc with a non-deterministic narrative experience, where you could possibly have different possibilities depending on what the audience decides to do. So I guess in this case it's not really as direct, because I guess the Fred winning and losing is more to do with how well Fred fights. So I guess the choice there isn't exactly a yes or no choice. It's just like sometimes some of that is am I good enough at fighting? But I guess the point is that there's not just one deterministic there's just not just one line. It's not different people experience different things. But anyway, once we finish that, we can go ahead and expand more, make more states, because I feel like we need we need more things. It's not quite as interesting as I want it to be yet. So let's go ahead and we've identified goons. So I guess like McSnoot begins to instruct his goons to grab Felicia. So then we need to go back to our sort of character sheet, world sheet, or whatever we want to call it, and then define what these goons are. So they're just basically henchmen, and they're not very principled. And I guess you can do lots of different things with this if you were to try to make this, because maybe, possibly, even though at this stage of the story, Fred is now basically physically useless, but he can still, like, he still has his charm. So maybe you could do something like you convince McSnoot's goons to turn on McSnoot, like or something like that, because they don't care really about McSnoot. They only care about getting paid. So but yeah, like let's go back to the states, the state diagram, and keep expanding. So what I'm thinking is, maybe with since we talked about charming, maybe we don't need to fight Lord McSnoot straight at the very beginning. Maybe we don't need to wait until we get beaten up to start using our charms. So like maybe we'll just decide to charm Lord McSnoot at the beginning. So that's the new transition, and then like we sort of build that out. We have some opportunity for comedic relief as well, because you have the you're now not sparring with fisticuffs. You're sparring with words, so there's some jokes to be had there. But yeah, so essentially what I've explained right now is just an example run through of how to build a narrative state network. So well, where do you want the story to go next? I'll just do like one more example here. You can actually use pre-existing states. So now, like, one of the possibilities here is if the charming doesn't work, you can still go ahead and decide to use violence. But then, since we've already built up this state here, we can just use this. We don't have to build like another one. And I guess I'm just doing this for illustrative purposes. Maybe it's not the best design choice to do this, but I'm just saying that it's possible for you to do that. But if we have a look, anyway, I think this is the last modification that we'll do on this example. But if we have a look through these branches, we have let's look at all the pathways. So we have the original pathway: exposition, tension building, climax, and then resolution. But then the other pathways, we also have exposition, tension building, some comedy, and then finally we go to climax and then resolution. Yeah, so like obviously you can, as I was explaining, you can build more branches here, because if this pathway here doesn't have any user agency at all, because they don't have the possibility to do something else. But conceivably, you could decide to do something else, like something else could happen, and then it will branch out this way. But then if you just keep using this device of keeping note of where the stage of the tension, or like the story stage is, you can control the narrative arc this way. So you can never end up in a situation, or maybe you do, but like you at least have some visibility where you can see where each pathway is going through in terms of the narrative arc, and you can kind of control it that way. And obviously this isn't done. This node needs extra resolution, but you can go ahead and do that later on. Okay, one more note. So essentially this is a tool for making it manageable to still have some narrative experience that's a certain level of quality, that's coherent, but then also have some agency. And this is how we control for all the different variations. But yeah, so that's this is one way. I mean, this is just an example of how to use the narrative state networks. Hopefully, I'm just going back to this. Hopefully, this algorithm kind of makes sense. If you were just to follow the steps, you'll end up like with this kind of thing. As we were going through this, I wasn't really thinking about it's very algorithmic. Well, it is an algorithm, but we're not really sort of taking into account creativity much. Like we're just letting things play through and then making sure that we have this dramatic arc. So now you kind of got to think about that too. So like this sort of worked example doesn't really go through that. It's just basically showing you how the algorithm works. But let's not forget that there's also extra stuff. So for example, the characters that we put in like basically this is the starting point, and this starting point determines what's going to happen like in this network. So the quality of that also determines the quality of this, because all these different interactions are based on the relationships and the motivations and the abilities of all the agents that you have within your world sheet, your character sheet. So yeah, so that's a key skill, and then how do you build that skill? I guess one way to do it is just practice. But I guess I'm just saying it's not just all algorithmic. There's some you can see you can do a lot of creative things in here while you're following the steps. But it makes it the steps of the algorithm makes it easier, so you're not completely drowning. Anyway, having said that, there are some heuristics or like some quick things we can use. So usually, if we created power imbalances right at the start, that's usually a good. Usually when you have power imbalances within relationships and things, that can produce drama. So I guess like knowing just these sort of things is just a matter of experience, where you've seen these things before, and it's and then like the phrase is, oh, I know where this is going, and I guess essentially that's what practice gives you. But yeah, so let's use narrative state networks to try and answer this question: how do we get the benefits of both story structure and audience agency? Yeah, it's probably a little bit more than 15 minutes, but yeah, that's it. Any questions? Please send me an email, and then post in the forum. And I guess good luck. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop this now. Bye bye.